Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming to the webinar today. My name's Adam. I'm a member of the Chicago Mayor's Office and excited to talk about the second round of Together Now. So we initially launched the first round of Together Now in June to help businesses reopen and stay open during the time of, unprecedented challenges that small businesses are facing in Chicago right now. And even though many small businesses are open now, the challenges of COVID-19 haven't gone away, and we understand that. So we want to provide continued support through this second round of Together Now, specifically through operational support cost grants that, as you can see, a number of partners have joined us in helping to fund. So during our time today, I'm going to provide an overview of the grant program itself, eligibility and documentation requirements, and then we'll actually flip through the application itself fairly quickly just to give a of where the application is and what it looks like. None of this should take too long, so we'll actually probably save most of our time to answer any questions you may all have in the back half of the session. So to start off, the second round will be offering 4,000 operational support cost grants. These support cost grants are meant to provide both for-profit and nonprofit businesses with resources they need, specifically to help with costs related to operations, in the face of challenges due to COVID-19. They must be used to replenish inventory, for example, or any other necessary operating cost needs related to losses experienced to COVID-19 on or after March 1st. So we could go into a bit more detail on that later, but in terms of specific eligibility requirements, the business must be located within the city of Chicago. When I say business, that includes nonprofit.
Adam, it seems that we have lost audio on your end.
Can you hear me? I can jump in here until he gets back.
Yes, Katie, we can hear you.
Great. Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. I think we lost sound around the time that Adam had mentioned that businesses as well as nonprofits are eligible for the grant. So what must be located obviously within the city of Chicago, have 100 or fewer employees, have lost at least 25% in revenue due to COVID-19, meaning when you think about average revenue from 2019 or through about March of this year versus what you are earning now for your business, that there's been at least a 25% decrease in that, and that you did not receive an operational grant during the first round of Together Now, which took place between June and August of this year. There's also a number of ineligible business types. You can see them here on the screen. I won't read through all of these, but we'll highlight just a few. For instance, chain businesses, this includes regional or national chains, including franchises, are not eligible. Branch banks and payday loan stores, nightclubs, excluding music venues, massage parlors, strip clubs, junkyards, cannabis dispensaries, religious institutions, and others are not eligible. And this full list will be available on the application itself. So when you do go in to apply, you'll see this list in case you're unsure about your particular business. If there is a question about a particular type of business that's not listed here, but you have a question about whether or not it will be eligible, we do have a email address that you can send that question to. And I think we can post it here in the chat as well. It's togethernow@cityofchicago.org, and we can let you know if you'd be eligible or not. Adam, I'm not sure if your audio is back or if I should keep going.
Yes, can you hear me?
Wonderful. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. Thank you for covering the ineligible businesses. So we could go now to the documentation that's required as part of the application. Apply at this website, which we'll go to in a moment, but when you do apply, there are 4 pieces of documentation that are required for the application to be accepted. The first is either a business bank statement from 2020 or tax documentation from 2019. Either of these statements should include the business address and name at the top of the document, as well as the date clearly labeled as well. The second one is a valid Chicago business license, state business license, or 501c3 to serve as proof of operations within the city. So if you're a business, the 501c3 would be sufficient. If you're for profit, most of the time, especially in round 1, we noticed that the Chicago business license would be required for the business type, but there are specific instances where a state business license would qualify in place of the Chicago business license. So a few examples of that are any sort of daycare or education facility, lawyers, contractors. If you run a taxi business, the medallion would be sufficient from the state. So there's definitely some nuance when it comes to that. If you have specific questions about your business type, again, feel free to email the Together Now email at cityofchicago.org. But generally speaking, if you do have a Chicago business license, that is the safest bet and the one that's easiest for us to check off and say, okay, they have proof of operations within the city, and move on to the next portion of the application. In terms of the other 2 required documents, it's valid ID. So that'd be a driver's license, state ID, or passport. This should be from the business owner who is applying through the application. So the name on the ID should match the name of the applicant as well. And then a completed W-9 form with the signature. And the link to the W-9 form is provided within the application itself and is very quick to fill out. So again, those are the 4 documents we'll be looking for in your application. If you have any specific questions about, if you have those documents or if there's a nuance for your business type that you want to cover, feel free to ask or send it to that email address that we mentioned earlier. I do want to quickly cover, we did see 2 documents in the first round now were submitted fairly frequently that we unfortunately can't accept as proof of operations. So certificates of good standing from the state or articles of incorporation cannot be used in place of a Chicago business license or a state. So please keep that in mind. And if these are the only 2 documents you have, please reach out and we can discuss how we can make it so you will a different form of license and where you can maybe find the details to attain that. At this point, we're going to go over to the application itself, so everyone can see where that is in relation to the website. So this is the Together Now website. Details about the grant, why it was launched, and who we're hoping to support. There's a lot of really great frequently asked questions down here that are a great resource as well about eligibility, what the grant could be used for, when and where you could apply, and different business types are eligible. So definitely encourage you to check out this page. In terms of the application itself, you could find an English version and Spanish version at the bottom of the website. Looking at the application itself, we mentioned the email as a resource where you could reach out with questions. This is another great resource where if you have any questions about required documents, or if you maybe submitted your application and forgot to include one or two of them, this would be a great link to go to, since it'll go directly to the people who are aggregating the application. So if you forgot a document, you could send and they'll be sure to include it so the application is complete. So quickly looking through the application itself now, first there's some eligibility questions related to location of the business, number of employees, identification type that you'll be providing as part of your application, and then losses related to COVID and what the need is. So that's the first part of the application. Next one is information related to the business owner itself. Just some personal information. This will not impact eligibility in any way. If you are a nonprofit applying, we got this question during the last webinar. If there isn't a quote unquote owner of the nonprofit, the executive director should be the one applying and filling out the application in place of the business owner. In terms of business information itself, this will be the again, we usually see that this should match the address that's on your bank statement or tax documentation. It's not disqualifying if it doesn't, because we understand that there can be discrepancies in addresses, whether it's a home address or things like that. But consistency in address when possible helps us, again, just kind of say check and move on to the next application after approving yours. And then this is where we'll know whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit, which will be helpful when looking at the Chicago business license or the 501c3. And then some other more specific questions about liquor license, home-based business, and what revenue and gross profit was in 2019. EIN as well, that's helpful for us sorting through applications. This is where the documents will be uploaded. Again, for that we covered either a bank statement or tax documentation, proof of operations, valid ID for the business owner or executive, and a completed W-9, which you could find that form right here. And then there'll just be 2 legal attestations here, and that's basically legally binding, saying that you will be using the funds that you would receive through the grant for necessary operating cost needs related to losses due to COVID-19. And then lastly, some bank account information at the bottom. This is just so if approved for a grant, we'll be able to get that funding over to you as quickly as possible. This information obviously won't be shared outside of our partners who are processing the applications. So that was the application. Again, it could be found at cityofchicago.org/togethernow. We'll put that in the chat box as well. But I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now. So lastly, to close before we move on to questions, the application is open until this Monday, August 31st, right before midnight. Grant winners will be notified within 3 to 4 weeks after the application period ends, and funds will be dispersed soon after that. And here's this page of resources available through BACP and our other partners that could be good to point you in the direction of as well. But great, I think we're ready to move on to questions now.
Great, thank you so much, Adam. First question is, I have questions about the businesses that are excluded from applying. How is something like a nightclub defined, for example?
That's a good question. So a nightclub as operating at night, serving alcohol with a music license for live performances as well. So definitely some nuance there. But for example, a bar that's serving food and operating throughout the day would be in a different category from a nightclub.
Is this also for the self-employed, like rideshare drivers?
So for rideshare drivers specifically, I don't know, Katie, if you have an answer to that, but we accepted many applicants who were taxi drivers in the first round. Rideshare could get a bit because, again, there has to be a business owner with proof of operations and licenses associated with that, and that usually isn't required for a rideshare applicant, which could make eligibility difficult in that case.
Yeah, this one we need to double check on. And so we can send out a note to this group afterwards. I don't believe that they are eligible, but we will double check and get back to you.
Next question. If a business applied the first round but did not receive the funding, can they apply for the second round?
Yes, you can, and we strongly encourage you to do so. If you think that you weren't accepted lack of documentation and you're not sure exactly what went wrong, we encourage you to email us at togethernow at cityofchicago.org, and we'll be able to look back at the application and provide some guidance to make sure you're hopefully successful in the second application round.
And a follow-up to that would be, this person applied for the Together Now grant during the last round and was not selected for a grant. Do they need to reapply for this upcoming grant?
Yes, you will have to reapply through the portal we just did. Hopefully it'll be a quick process for you since you, filled out the application before and gathered the documents, but we will need a second application.
Slightly specific, I have a small bath and body company. I sell my products at different events and also obtain new customers that way. Due to COVID, I have not attended any vending events. Would I qualify?
So that's a great question, and I think it comes back to the documentations that required. So if, as a business, you have a business license, you would be eligible, but if it's the type of business where there wasn't any formal documentation with the city, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to disperse funding. So it's, again, those 4 documents are required. And that business that was just described isn't one of the ineligible business types. So it's more about if the business itself has that documentation available and ready to submit.
This person is a concessionaire in the Park District. They issue them a permit, not a business license. Would they qualify?
That's a great question. That would be another one that if you could email us at togethernow@cityofchicago.org, we'll double check on our end with our partners in that department to make sure it would qualify as proof of operations. But we'll make sure to follow up on that.
Does it matter what month the bank statement is from?
No, it doesn't. Just from 2020. And the point there is we just want to see that there's a business bank account with some sort of money in and out of it. But any bank statement from 2020 will suffice.
Will ward offices and delegate agencies be notified or given list of winners in their ward? So
during the first round, we had a few wards and aldermen reach out to us asking about grant recipients, and we sent out that list. We didn't automatically send it out to all the aldermen, so if the ward would like that information, just follow up with us after the second round, and we're happy to disperse that.
And speaking of neighborhood development centers, are chambers of commerce eligible for the grant?
Yes, they are.
Is there a difference between massage parlor and a legitimate spa or massage therapy business?
Yes, there is. And for personal services, if there's a massage therapist and there's a license through the state or other proof of there would be a distinction there.
What documents are accepted in lieu of city and state issued business licenses?
So I hesitate to give because, again, there are a lot of different industries that have, fairly nuanced answers to that. But from the first round, 95% of applicants that were approved had a Chicago city business license. There are situations where a state license is also acceptable. Again, can't say every situation where that would arise, but some examples are if there's daycare, a taxi medallion, contractors with a license from the state, or most medical practices. And then, of course, if you're a nonprofit, a 501c3 would be as well. Outside of that, those are really the main acceptable proofs of operation. If you think there's a unique situation to your business, feel free to email us. But generally speaking, those 3 are what we'll be looking for an eligible applicant.
A question is, how do you obtain the city business license? And I will just say, from the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. We are still processing business licenses where applicable online, and you could visit chicagobusinessdirect.org. I will put that website in the chat box so you could reference them. And then also, I just want to note that business licenses with an expiration date between March 15th through September 30th are considered active until October 30th. And licensees will have until October 30th to renew without paying a late fee. So we are still processing business licenses. It's all being done remote. And there actually is a contact page on the Chicago Business Direct. So if you have specific questions for licensing, you could also reach us that way. A question came in. My business just started this year, so I don't have 2019 figures.
In that case, instead of sending the 2019 tax documentation, if you send a 2020 bank statement, that will be sufficient for that piece of the application.
Can funeral homes apply?
Yeah, that they're not listed in the ineligible businesses. So as long as the proper documentation is, they should be eligible.
Can you explain some of the things the grant covers? For example, gas, electricity, trash service?
Yeah, so maybe this would be a helpful time where I could flip to the frequently asked questions has some useful information here that we can go to. So if we look here, Katie, do you want to give a brief overview of this while I pull up the frequently asked questions?
Elise, do you mind repeating the question, please?
Yes, 1 second. Explain the things to use the grant for. Example, electricity, gas, trash service.
Sure. So the grants, when we say operational uses, this can be anything that it takes to run your business. And so this can include payroll, insurance, inventory, bills, other bills like, insurance or electricity, et cetera, as you mentioned. Essentially, it's not furniture and furnishings. So any like hardware that's part of your business or any infrastructure, meaning like physical repairs to your building, would not be eligible either. And so it's essentially just anything that it takes to run the business from an operational standpoint.
Perfect, thank you. And I'm having trouble sharing my web browser, but I could just share reading off of it myself that a few things that the grant may not be used for are severance pay, workforce bonuses, property taxes, legal settlements, expenditures that will be reimbursed through another federal program, or reimbursement to other parties for goods previously donated. So that's a bit also on what, again, the operational support cost grant cannot be used for.
If there are two businesses sharing one physical property address, can both businesses apply?
Yes, as long as the business owner is separate people. So if both businesses are owned by a different person and they have their own business licenses, then that is acceptable.
I just want to make note again that the Small Business Center, which handles all of City of Chicago business licensing, is not open to the public. We are processing licenses online, once again, at chicagobusinessdirect.org, and that is posted in the chat box. Is the award determined by ownership or location? For example, we have multiple locations. each a simple member LLC owned by common ownership. Each location has its own business license. Would each location qualify or only one?
So the first answer to that is that chain businesses are one of the ineligible business types, including franchises. So, in a franchise business, each franchise is owned by a different person, but that would be ineligible, unfortunately, for this application. If it's the same business owner, and this isn't a chain that we're talking about, that, each business owner can apply for one grant. So in that situation, it wouldn't be able to have multiple applications if all of these are owned by the same person.
Okay. A non-for-profit question: how do you address revenue and profit for an application for a non-for-profit since they just received donations?
That's a great question. So you'll make sure to mark yourself, obviously, as a nonprofit for that question in the application. And then for those two questions, there's an option that's under $100,000 for both. Just select the under $100,000 one, which I guess in that case can be inclusive of zero.
If we have already received the PPP loan or the SBA loan, are we still eligible for the Together Now grant? Can we use the grant for employee payroll purposes or rent and other bills?
So you are still eligible. If you received an operational cost support grant during the first round of Together Now specifically, you unfortunately would be ineligible for the second round now of Together Now. But if you received PPE loans or any of those other state programs that were mentioned, you'll still be eligible for this next round of funding. In terms of what you can spend it on, as Katie mentioned, it's meant for operational expenses, any expenses that come with operating your business day to day. It cannot be used for infrastructure repair purposes, such as repairing windows or buying new furniture for the business.
Can childcare providers who received childcare grants also apply for this city grant?
Yes, they can.
Can you just mention the email one more time if there's unique questions?
Yeah, so I'll maybe enter it in the chat right now.
Someone asked, can you share the FAQ link here? Most easiest is actually just going to the chicago.gov/Together Now. It's right on the homepage at the bottom, I believe. Is that correct, Adam?
Yeah, that is correct. And let me see, I'll try to put it in now as well to all participants, and hopefully that link can work as well. But yeah, it's at the bottom right of the website.
Can you please clarify further that the business registration documents from the Secretary of State do not qualify?
Yeah, so I could clarify that. So basically, if it's of good standing from the state or the articles of incorporation, those are the two that won't qualify. So that won't be sufficient for proof of operations currently within the city. Instead, we require the Chicago business license that, again, will be dated, have an expiration date, and the name of the business on it. Or in specific instances, a state license, such as if you're a registered optometrist or another doctor through the state, a lawyer, run a daycare, other specific industry types that have a state license that proves operations. If you think that your business might fall in that category and you don't have a Chicago business license, but do have a state license that might be applicable, feel free to email us and we'll confirm or not.
Are landlords able to apply due to loss of rental income?
Unfortunately, property owners will not be eligible for the second round of Together Now. But I encourage, we will have between the state and city, hopefully other programs opening throughout the fall as businesses continue to struggle, and keep an eye out for those that might be applicable for property owners.
Do you have to have a good credit score?
We won't be, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that people reviewing the applicants will be checking credit score with the information provided.
No, that will not be reviewed.
After funds are dispersed, is there going to be follow-up documentation to confirm that the funds were used as intended?
So there's no formal follow-up planned at this time, but we'd strongly encourage you to track pretty closely exactly how you spend the money and keep, notes of that, because this is federal funding and there is a good chance, or there is a chance that auditing could happen later on. Do keep documentation about where those funds go. So if that does happen, your business is prepared to do so.
Can the bank statement be in the name of the business, or can it be in the name of the owner?
The bank statement should be it should be a business bank account registered to the business. So that is, again, when we are reviewing the bank statements, we'll be looking for the business name and address on the bank statement itself. And again, either a bank statement or tax documentation from 2019. You don't need both. You need one of those two.
And just again, a simple explanation, is the Together Now grant forgivable, or is this a loan?
It's a grant. So if approved, $4,000 for you to spend, again, on operational cost needs, you will not have to pay that back to the city.
Can I apply for my 3 businesses having the same address?
So if you are the owner of all 3 businesses, you can only receive a $4,000 grant per business owner. So if a business owner has 5 businesses, they could only apply for one of those businesses. So in that case, would encourage you to choose one of those 3 businesses and apply through that business license and other documentation for that specific business.
If your business is not in the South and West Side communities, does your business still have a chance with this grant?
Absolutely. And, we will say, and it's said on the website, that we will be give a fair portion of the funding specifically to South and West Side businesses, purely because we received fewer applications from those areas during the first round, and we want to make sure we're supporting all areas of the city equitably. But there is funding allocated for North Side businesses as well. So again, we do encourage you to apply, and by no means will all North Side businesses, again, we have funding for North Side as well.
How can I add missing information before the application acceptance expires?
I might need that question to be clarified in terms of what missing information. Is that an incomplete application or documents that need to be obtained before the deadline?
This person does not specify, but are people able to go back to their applications after they submitted them?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, but again, if you do submit your application and afterwards that you didn't fill it out completely or miss some documents, there is a link at the top of the application where you can submit questions about required documents or submitted applications, and the people who are actually aggregating the applications will see that. So if you missed a document, you'll be able to communicate with them and they'll add it to your application.
Oh, the person responded that it was in fact about documents.
Perfect. Yeah. So again, if you submitted your application and realize now that you missed a few documents, reach out to the people at that link at the top of the application, and they'll help make sure that your application is completed before the deadline.
Okay. For my business, we intentionally hire people from underserved areas of Chicago. How can we notate that in our application? Would it increase the likelihood of obtaining a grant?
Great question. Thank you for that. That we're basing the grant allocations on community area, not based on hiring practices. So that won't impact, the system that we have in place for dispersing the funds.
Does the 501c3 letter from the IRS qualify as documentation?
For a nonprofit, yes, it does.
Would a program director be able to apply if the executive director is unavailable?
For the nonprofit, yeah, that should be fine. I'd say that, again, when we have the other documents, such as make sure, obviously, that the driver's license matches the program director who's applying. And then if the application or if the bank tax documentation doesn't have that name, it could be worthwhile to send a note to the link at the top of the application to make note of that, so the person reviewing the application is aware.
A few questions are coming in about businesses doing their operations in the city of Chicago, but they're based in suburban cities. Can they still apply?
So it is based on the business address. So if in order for a business to be eligible, it has to operate within the city of Chicago based on where the business is based, not necessarily on, I guess, if it services where it is operated. Because again, that'll be tied to having a city of Chicago business license that shows operations within the city. So in that case, unfortunately, businesses would not be eligible.
Did you mention that people can get feedback from their first application if they were not funded?
Yes, you can. So if you email email address togethernow@cityofchicago.org, and you're wondering why you weren't eligible or didn't receive a grant in the first round, we'll be able to look up and see whether it was based on the lottery and just unfortunately there wasn't enough funds specific community area, or if something was missing from the application itself.
Is there specifically how many grants do you expect to award in the second round?
Are still securing funding sources and don't have a specific number of grants in mind, but it'll be close to the number that was allocated in the first round of grants when we allocated over $6 million in funds to over 1,500 businesses in Chicago.
Can we purchase COVID-19 PPE supplies with the grant money?
Yes, if it's for operating your business, if it's for your employees or customers to be safe, then absolutely.
Is a language immersion preschool eligible?
Yes, as long, again, as the proper documentation is submitted, but in and of itself, that wouldn't be an ineligible business type.
For the 2020 bank statements, if I get one monthly, so you want one for every month of 2020 or just the last month?
Just any month in 2020. So it can be the most recent month, it can be one earlier in the year, but again, we're just looking for proof of operation and that there's a business account under the name of the business.
Can you explain what the lottery process is?
Yeah, so basically when we receive our applications, we sort them into community areas. Once sorted into the community areas, randomly assign a number to each application. Our reviewers then go through the applications, and once they kind of approve the number of, they go, from the top of the numbers assigned in the lottery down, and then once they reach the maximum of funds allocated, we review those applications. If any, for whatever reason, are deemed ineligible, they go back and continue going down the list until, again, they max out the funds for those community areas specified.
How long does it take to deposit funds into the bank for grantees that were approved for the first one? And then can you talk about the timeline for the second round?
Yeah, so for the first round specifically, most of the operational cost support grant funds were deposited last week. There's a few that still haven't gone out based on inaccurate bank information or some one-off situations that arose for specific businesses. The infrastructure grants are in the process of being approved. And since this is federal funding, there just were some extra processes that came up that ended up making the process take a bit longer. But the first round funding almost is entirely out. And if your business hasn't received the funding yet, should shortly. And feel free to follow up if you have any questions about that. For the second round itself, applications close on August 31st. If you receive a grant or if you are not approved, either way, you'll be notified of your application status within 3 to 4 weeks. And then we'll disperse the funding as fast as possible after that point.
I'm a sole proprietor. Should I use my EIN or my social security number?
So the application itself, we asked for an EIN number, but I just want to clarify that that isn't in place of any of the documentation that's required. That's just a supplement of the application itself. So again, a business license, tax documentation statement, proof of ID, and then a W-9 form are required as well.
I'm an architect. Is my state of Illinois architect's license good for the business license?
Yeah, that does sound like it would be permissible. Just making sure that it obviously says if there's an expiration date on it, it includes your name or the name of the business. Those are things we're checking for, but that would likely be approved as a proof of operations.
I've never filed a W-9. Is it too late to file?
No, it's not too late. So on the application itself, at the bottom where it lists the application requirements, there's a link to fill out the W-9. If you fill it out with your date and signature and then include that as part of the application, again, it's a very quick process to fill out the W-9 form.
Just one more time, if you could clarify that this is for nonprofits and for profit companies.
Yes, it is. Both are eligible to apply. Yes.
Are car washes eligible?
Yeah, car washes in and of themselves wouldn't be an ineligible business type, but again, it would have to be a business that's operating within the city of Chicago, more than 100 employees, and then has the proper documentation in hand as well as part of the application.
Are the questions different from round one? I'm assuming in the application.
Yeah, we made a few changes around the edges. I'd say that the vast majority of the applications the exact same, but if you did submit in the first round, I would make sure again you have to fill out a second application, and there might be a few differences that you should keep in mind, but by and large, the process is going to feel very familiar.
Are religious institutions excluded / places of worship?
Yeah, unfortunately, if we look at the ineligible business types here, places of worship would be ineligible to apply for the second round of Together.
A couple questions about eligible businesses. Number one, a personal training and fitness instruction. Number two, online travel businesses based in Chicago.
So for both of those, a similar answer to one previously asked, that those in and of themselves, again, aren't ineligible business types, but it would be about if they have the proper documentation required, whether that's a Chicago business license, registered through this, or an applicable state license, that would be needed to prove operations in the city. So it's more about having the documentation itself through the business, not that those two business types would be ineligible in and of themselves.
One more time, if you received the grant in the first round, are you eligible for the second round?
So if you received an operational cost support grant during the first round of Together Now, which would have been $4,000, you would unfortunately be ineligible to apply for the second round. if you are one of the businesses who received an infrastructure grant, which could have been anywhere up to $10,000, did not receive an operational cost support grant in the first round, you would be eligible. So basically, the point is that you could receive one infrastructure and one cost support grant across the 2 rounds. You can't receive 2 operational cost support grants.
Does an applicant need to have no city debt to be included?
So as part of the application, let me see if you could find it here. So it's actually in the PowerPoint, but yeah, you can't owe the city more than $2,500 in fees to be eligible.
A PO box is listed on my taxes. Is this okay?
Yeah, that would be fine if that's a different address from the business address. Again, that will also be fine. But generally speaking, if you did have a tax document or a bank statement address matched, that'll just make it quicker for your reviewer to, again, just be like, perfect, check, and move on to the next application. But if that is the case, that won't be disqualifying in and of itself.
Regarding nonprofits, 501c3s are okay to apply. What about 501c6s? That would be some of the chambers of commerce.
Yes, those would be eligible as well.
I have a DBA certificate. Does this qualify as documentation?
So that'd be great to follow up on if you send an email to account, but my inkling is that it wouldn't be, but I don't want to say that definitively because that could be something we check on. But my guess would be that if it's just a certificate of registration or something along those lines, it would more so fall in the category of these documents, which unfortunately we can't accept as proof of operations in the city.
Are you able to purchase office supplies and equipment?
So office supplies are eligible as operational costs, but unfortunately furniture, fixtures, and equipment, so equipment in this case for your question, would not be eligible for use with these funds.
Once again, can you talk about how the grants are going to be distributed in the different locations around the city? Obviously, emphasis on south and west sides. What about different parts of Chicago?
Yeah, so we have funds allocated for businesses across Chicago. As mentioned, there's going to be an emphasis on businesses on the south and west sides just to make sure that they receive an equitable amount of the city distributed funds. That doesn't mean if you're in a different part of the city, you won't receive a grant. It's just going to be part of the lottery system and seeing where the funds are distributed across the different areas of the city. But regardless of where you are, we strongly encourage you to apply.
Are bartenders eligible?
So similar answer to other inquiries, that being a bartender in and of itself wouldn't disqualify you, but just be a matter of if you have some sort of state license, that would be proof of operations or bartending within the city, which I'm not sure if that exists. So again, it's about having the proper documentation required more so than the specific occupation.
Do you know if these grants will have to be entered as income on business tax?
Katie, I'm not sure if you know that, or we could follow up with some of our contacts in BACP.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and we unfortunately can't give any tax advice. So you'd have to follow up with an accountant or a CPA on that. Our apologies, I'm not sure.
Do funds need to be spent over a specific period of time?
Yeah, so given that these are meant to be used for COVID losses, the assumption is that these funds are needed immediately, particularly with regard to inventory and payroll and rent. And so the expectation is that the funds would be used by the end of the calendar year.
If someone has a state of Illinois business license and they're having difficulties renewing it, can they still apply?
So I know that with the Chicago business license, there's been a period of if they weren't able to extend it until through October, it'll be eligible. I guess it would depend on when the expiration date was. If it was earlier this year, we could talk to the state about some exceptions. But if it was from prior to COVID, expired in 2018 or 2019, that unfortunately would not, definitely would not be eligible.
For a nonprofit whose 50C3 is pending, are they still able to apply?
So in that situation, that would be tough because when we accept nonprofit applications, it's with the approval letter that they receive from the IRS. So in this case, since the IRS hasn't actually approved the 501c3 yet, we would have to wait for that approval to have that proof of operation for the application.
Can you use the grant to pay for your business car payment?
Yes, I believe that should be fine if the car use is necessary to operate your business.
I don't see any more general or somewhat general questions coming in. We will spend the next couple of minutes just entering some of the websites and email addresses in the chat box so they can be referenced there. Adam and Katie, do you have any additional points?
Thank you everyone for attending. We're here to help. We want to make sure that you're submitting applications that meet the eligibility requirements and have the documentation. So you have your shot in the lottery. So please follow up with any questions. And thank you for attending the webinar to educate yourself. I think this will set you up well to submit proper applications that have a great shot at receiving funding.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just thank you all very, very much. If you have any questions as you fill out the application, and as a reminder, it closes on the 31st. So over the next couple of days, if you have specific questions, please email us. We'll be quick to respond and support you to make sure that the application is as high quality as possible.
Great, thank you. And we'll put the information in the chat right now. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.